Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rima, and I welcome you all to the sixth session of our Gender Talk series in English, presented by the Women's Department of Bharathidasan University, Open Space Foundation, and Nirangal Charitable Trust. We are extremely glad to see all of you here today. Our speaker for today's session is Tejasvi Sevekari, who is the Executive Director of Saheli Sangh, Pune, and our topic for the day is Sex Workers, Law, and Gender. If you see to your left, there is a panel with public chat and shared notes option. Anything that you want to share along with your name, you can put it down in public chat. If you want to share anything anonymously, you can do that in the shared notes section. Whatever you write in the shared notes section will appear without your name. You can ask the speaker questions during the session. We will also be live streaming this session on Facebook and YouTube. And if you have any questions that you want to address privately, you may do that after we stop the live streaming. We hope this session will be meaningful to you. And now I will ask Tejasvi to take over. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and I'm very much thankful to Nirangal for giving me this opportunity to interact and speak about my experience working with sex workers and with definitely a gendered lens. People usually think about sex work and available has an idea that there are other genders who are also working as sex workers. So this starts from that, and usually we always see as those who are working in the social sector, they know that workers are the most marginalized group in our society, and they have multiple challenges which people hardly notice, take cognizance of it, and want to do something about it. So here we stand, and I will be speaking a little bit about sex work and law first. What what the legal provisions we have around sex work in India, and what are the official ways if you want to know sex work.
Sorry, Tejasvi, I think our voice is breaking up in between. Tejasvi, I think your voice is breaking up in between. Do you want to try without video, or do you want to maybe see if the internet is an issue? I do not know. It was initially clear, now it's breaking up.
Okay, now I'm audible.
Yes, Tejasvi.
Hello. Yeah. So
Maybe we missed the last 2 or 3 minutes what you were saying. Do you want to go back?
okay. No, I was just mentioning that how sex work needs to get properly understood from the legal point of view in India, because sex work, though sex work per se is not a crime in India, it is highly criminalized, and sex workers being a very marginalized group in our society, they get further marginalized because of the legal standing in India and similar places around the globe. And when we speak about sex work and sex workers, usually people think about women only and not the other gender identities as sex workers. So that was the beginning of my talk. And so when we just think about sex worker or any person in our society think or even started thinking about sex work, usually these terms come in front, like many people while using the term, people will not feel very comfortable using the term sex work because it is not getting considered as a work. So prostitution is a very common term people use when it comes to sex work or sex workers, red light areas, all the HIV intervention programs, they will come in your mind. Trafficking is highly associated with sex work. That's why trafficking is another term people usually use. Brothel, solicitation of customers, this is also a very common term people will come across. Legal point of view says many things about around sex work, which is also important to understand that living on the earning of a sex worker is also one phrase the law uses in India, and that is criminalized. And obviously rescue and rehabilitation. So there are some common terms people think of when it comes to sex work and sex workers. So each have their own understanding and meaning, and people have different perceptions towards it. But it is very common in public sector, in social work field, that people mainly consider sex workers are women and not other gender identities. So that entire debate and discussion starts with women only. So I always say that perception towards sex work is highly gendered in our society. Okay, and when we speak about sex work, it is highly getting conflicted with trafficking because the general perception towards sex work is that all sex workers are victims of trafficking, and that's why it gives very minimum space for voluntary entry of human beings into sex work because it is highly associated with trafficking. And I think people in the sector know that how the lobby of so-called anti-trafficking organization works very strongly and affects all policy and decision making when it comes to law or social security or even the policies of the government. So that's a regular struggle between the sex workers' rights groups and the anti-trafficking organizations in India. Across the globe also, you will not see any much difference between these two polarized kind of work towards sex work and trafficking. So this is the situation. India is getting considered as both the source and destination as well as transit point for men, women and children. But if you see the statistics, you will find the cases who are getting registered are mainly of girls and women and hardly of other gender identities. That's a fact. And that's why, as I mentioned before, it is seen as a women's profession and not much to do with the genders, other genders like male or transgenders or non-binary individuals. So I will start a little bit about the legal approaches people use, the different countries in the world use to looking at sex work. The first approach is prohibition, like you stop doing something, so it is not entirely but sex work is highly prohibited. It is not at all allowed. The another approach is legalization, which says that some part of sex work might be legalized or entire sex work as such gets legalized. Abolition is like there should not be sex work, and there are many factors have been abolished. The basic foundation of abolition approach is to stop, because and it stands on a moral kind of ground, usually seeing sex work as something which is immoral, and that's why I think you know that the anti-trafficking law in India says, the name itself says that it's an Immoral Traffic Prevention Act. Actually, law is not meant for say something about morality and immorality in our society, but that's how they work. So prohibition approach stands where all forms of sex work is unacceptable and therefore it is completely illegal, and all persons who are involved in sex work are punished. So you'll find in most states of USA as well as Middle East, they follow the prohibition approach. So entirely it is not just criminalized, but it is entirely illegal to do sex work or to work as sex workers in those states. When it comes to legalization, there are several countries like some major countries in Europe, like Germany, Netherlands, Iceland, Switzerland, Austria. They have legalized sex work. That doesn't mean that the life of sex workers in those countries are very happy. It's not the fact, because the entire control has been given to the state, and the state decides who will do sex work, who will not do sex work. They have their own rules and regulation, but one good side of it is that sex work is acceptable, like it is legalized, so it becomes a legal profession in those states, but the control is entirely with the state. So they have their own rules and regulation. They will give you license, they will do registration, health checkups will happen, and any act without the permission of the state is going to be treated as criminal. So it depends upon the state to decide whether this part of sex work is a crime or not. So the control lies with the state, and it gives several limitations to sex work. And one thing also we need to understand that it doesn't prevent trafficking, because it's a very important aspect that everybody, all state needs to understand, that trafficking is definitely different from sex work, though it is associated. So we need to figure out how we can deal with prevention of trafficking and allowing sex workers, those who are voluntarily entering into sex work, to do their work. Now, India, Canada, and England, the entire legal system is based on abolition approach, and we have anti-trafficking organizations who firmly believe on abolitionist approach. That some part of sex work is defined and some part is criminalized. Like we have solicitation is crime in India, living on the earning of a sex worker is crime, brothel keeping is crime, procurement and forcing somebody for sex work is crime. So several parts of sex work and the profession have been criminalized, but the person as such is not treated as a criminal thing, or that person is not getting treated as a criminal. But many things around sex work are treated as criminal. So ultimately, criminalization of persons who are doing sex work also takes place, and it leads to several issues of the persons who are involved in sex work. And there is no margin left for voluntary entry of persons into sex work in India, and the states where abolitionist approach is being used. So that's very important. So Indian legal system says, it is definitely having double standard, because the law says that solicitation, doing sex work in public place, there are several other aspects which says sex work is crime indirectly, not even not directly that sex work is crime, but all other aspects says that. But very interesting to know, and it's very double standard. Why we call it as double standard? Because the same law sees the person involved in sex work as victim of trafficking, but at the same time the law can also treat that person as criminal because the person is doing sex work in public place. So it's a very strange place where we stand when it comes to sex work in India. And so there are several other laws apart from ITPA, that is Immoral Traffic Prevention Act. There are many state laws also prevent and criminalize and penalize sex workers. Like for example, for Maharashtra, we have Bombay Police Act with two sections of that law that prevents sex workers for solicitation, those who are standing on the streets or they are standing near the brothels or even in the public places, that they can be penalized under those state laws. Nothing to do with immoral traffic prevention or act or IPC. There are anti-beggary acts. I think most of the states in India, they do have these acts, and they under that the sex workers are getting penalized or even taken away from that place and getting dumped into some shelters. So that is also a very common phenomenon when it comes to prohibition of sex work in India. And yeah, so in nutshell, I'm trying to explain why, because it is a clear double standard. It depends upon the police and the judiciary to treat a person either as a criminal or as a victim. So it's a very kind of ambiguous law, even though they don't consider sex work is a crime in India. So solicitation is public offense, and anybody can get penalized under that. Right from paying fine to imprisonment is also there. Recent amendment in section 13(2), which says that it has lowered the rank of the police officer, who can take action, who can arrange a police raid into the areas, or they can raid any brothel for that matter. And the lowering rank of the police officer has definitely created problems on the ground. It lead to lots of corruption as well as harassment issues happening against sex workers. So, and most of the community-based organizations and sex workers collective have tremendous fight against the Section 5C, but it is in process. It got sanctioned actually, and where any person who is going to a sex worker as client can be penalized. So that is because it is considered that the person is having sex with a traffic victim. So you can see the entire law is covered around the phenomenon that sex work is trafficking. There are other laws. I think I need not go again. So in short, no matter what gender the sex worker is having, but these 5Ds are become the destiny of the sex workers, because they are getting denied, which leads to disadvantageous situation, deprivation, obviously, discrimination, and so ultimately disconnect. Sex workers are highly disconnected from the mainstream society. I'm not just speaking about the sex workers, not just about the women who are doing sex work, but all genders. They definitely have a disconnect with the mainstream society, even though there are many sex workers who are staying in their families, not working in the brothels, but the disconnect is very much experienced and visible if you interact with sex workers of any gender for that matter. Yeah, so obviously we always see that sex work is gender, the focus is definitely on the women. Laws never, they are not gender inclusive, especially the rape law. There was, I can narrate to you in short, one case which has happened in Maharashtra, in Pune, in the city where I work. One transgender was brutally raped by a group of men, and she got in connection with the organization who's working for the transgenders' rights in Pune, and they helped her to go through the police, go through the entire process of launching a complaint in police, going to the court. Everything took place, but the district court has given the verdict that in the law, in the rape law, there is no mention of transgender. The mention is only of a woman. So technically, legally, rape can happen only against women. It is such a pathetic situation when it comes to a gender inclusive kind of and inclusive law, and which is based on human right. principles. We don't have those kind of laws and those kind of policies and protection for all the genders in our society. And so unfortunately, that person can't go forward. She was totally broken. She was totally mentally was so tired that she has not opted for the help from the organization and not pursued that case in the Supreme Court. So unfortunately that happened. So, but this is just a one representative case where at least something has gone. They have gone a little ahead by going to police and taking it to the court. But there are several incidences, several rape cases happened with transgenders, with male sex workers, and highly getting registered, recognized, and get justice. So that's a very sorry picture of our legal system, and not only the legal system but the society at large, how it sees sex work as only an issue of females and not of other genders. So similarly, trafficking, people always consider that only girls and women get trafficked. No boys or not transgenders are not getting trafficked, or male child doesn't get trafficked. So that this is a common phenomenon people have around trafficking. No provision of rescue, rehab, repatriation. This is a typical model people use for female sex workers. They first to rescue them, then think about their rehabilitation, and if she is from the other country, they will do repatriation. But again, if you see this entire legal provision, there is no mention of other genders than the female. So this is also one thing which clearly shows how our entire legal system and understanding towards sex work is highly gendered. And there is no provision of safe places, shelter homes for the transgenders or male sex workers or other gender identities, because it is never considered that it is their problem. So that entire perception needs to be changed, and people need to be having the awareness and acceptance that sex work is like any person can be a sex worker. So it needs to be very inclusive kind of situation. So there are, even if you look at the government policies now, there is some acceptance by the government and government policy towards transgender sex workers, but still will not find any special schemes or policies for male sex workers as well as non-binaries individuals. So because the usual construct of other genders being sex workers, that that they are habitual, they are habitual to have multiple partners, they are habitual to have kind of open relationships, and so they get into sex work. But women are treated as victims, and so there is no space for voluntary entry of women in sex work. People always consider them as victims, and for other genders, they're habitual. So this is a understanding, a perception. It's a very non-constructive, it's not a positive perception towards other genders. It hardly make any sense to a rational human being to see these identities with these kind of lenses. There is a little bit recognition of transgenders and transgender sex workers, so but it is leading to different kind of polarizations of identities in the entire sex workers community, because you will see the polarization was very much there among women sex workers and transgenders, and now you will see it is getting more polarized. People are like they like to work independently. So the community of sex workers is not a cohesive community. You will hardly find that all sex workers of different genders are working together. Even in the networks, you will find that there is not much space given to all genders working together. You need to create that kind of space, otherwise it becomes very difficult for the organizations and network and people of different gender to work together. Definitely we need to understand the commonalities and differences between all genders, but again, Sex work is such a profession which is highly stigmatized, not accepted by the state or the public at large, and highly stigmatized. Most of the issues are very common to all the genders who are involved in sex work. So at least common minimum agenda, I think people can work together on this, and to deal with the government and the judiciary and the law machinery. I think it's very necessary for all the genders of sex workers should come together and raise their voices. Yeah, for transgenders, I assume that Pune is the only place where there is a separate lane of transgenders very much into the red light area, and they are brothel based sex workers, transgender sex workers. I'm not aware, and I think that these kind of settings are not at all there. Uh, we consider that brothel, even though it is a illegal kind of area, it gives much security to sex workers of any gender for that matter. Like, it is a safe place for them because they know they are familiarized with the space. They stay together, and so the abuse and harassment which usually happens when they are alone, they are doing sex work alone. It's much better for any sex worker to stay in brothels. I know that this could be a big debate among the activists that brothel-based sex work is bad, and brothels are itself are the places where the human beings are getting abused and tortured and raped and all those kind of things. But we also need to understand as activists and workers working with sex workers that the entire trend of sex work in India is changing. And so because of increasing collectivizations and sex workers right-based groups and activists, I think things have changed a lot, and we also need to take cognizance of it. So that's very important. Yeah, I need not repeat, because the entire perception towards sex work is a moral kind of stand, and so whatever happens with any sex worker, people hardly take into consideration that something needs to be done. On the contrary, society will always think that they are doing something immoral, and so they need to be penalized. So nobody is bothered what happened with a sex worker. It's very difficult picture to understand and accept. So here is this is the courtesy of VAMP and Sangram. They use this pictorial formats for awareness around sex work and law in India, and it indicates how criminalization creates problem and decriminalization will help. So decriminalization is definitely a big thing which we really need to fight together in India. That there are many organizations struggling to register themselves as trade unions, but that's not taking place, because now you might be knowing that registration of unions itself has been stopped in India right now. So that's the picture currently. Yeah, so we really need to have a clear-cut separation of trafficking and voluntary sex work. So it is high time that the state should think about decriminalization, but till we have a very strong so-called anti-trafficking lobby and people are not considering sex workers as very important agents to prevent trafficking, I think this debate is going to continue. And unless we decriminalize, it is not possible that the sex workers will get dignity, safety, and their human rights gets protected. So it's very necessary for us to decriminalize sex work, to give the dignity of person as a worker, as a human being. It's high time that we should push this agenda. These are some writings I think people who are interested around sex work can go through. And the presentation is open for anybody. Anybody can please go ahead and download that and use it for your purpose, any awareness or any for your records also. So I think I will stop here and we can speak about if you have any issues, suggestions, even debates. Okay, I'm very much open to have any kind of debates, or if you don't agree to some of my points, please feel free to speak about, and we can interact. No issues about that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tejasvi. Actually, this program is also being streamed on YouTube and Facebook. So if
Okay.
there are more questions and we are not comfortable asking because it is being recorded, we can at some point stop the recording and the streaming. But
Sure.
in the meantime, I wanted to ask you maybe that I know that in this audience there are a lot of people who are either mental health professionals or preparing to be mental health professionals, studying counseling, clinical psychology, or practicing therapy already. Do you have anything to suggest for them in terms of how we can better help either individual sex workers who come to see them or in terms of the larger needs of the community as well? And then
Yeah.
we can go open up for questions from others as well.
Okay, okay. No, thank you, Delphina, for this, because the entire mental health aspect is always missing when it comes to any intervention with sex workers. And you know that when it comes to sex workers, people usually think about HIV/AIDS only, not beyond that. But salute to many sex workers collectives and community-based organizations who are fighting for the rights of sex workers, and beyond HIV/AIDS, they are working beyond HIV/AIDS. So now the entire discussions around mental health has coming into the space. So that's very important. So mental health practitioners, I think it is very necessary to work as a team when it comes to the sex workers organizations or interventions, because the mental health profession, especially the clinical psychologists, they come up with a very structured kind of training. And when you work on the community, things are very different. You will not, if you're used to have the structured kind of counseling sessions and confidentiality, in order to maintain confidentiality you need to have a separate space, counseling room. All those luxuries might not be possible if you are working on the ground with the community based organizations or the collectives. So that's very important. So that's very important. Trust building is a very important issue. I think the mental health professionals should understand that it takes time for the sex workers to have that kind of trust on you. So that it takes time. So the process may be a little bit longer as compared to other as compared to other persons than to with the sex workers. So it really takes time. Non-biased, that's so important, because it is very easy and very sometimes it happens just organically that the healthcare workers or the mental health care professionals, they will start giving you giving ideas and advice which is not really highly connected with the real life of sex workers. So that especially why you are not leaving sex work, doing something else. That's very it comes very organically. I'm specifically using this term organically because we don't consider sex work as work. So I always request anybody who is working, especially the mental health care professionals, that you need to see facts as facts and not giving any of your ideas or your thoughts, even though they are very positive. They might help the person, they might help to change their lives, but you need to respect that they know. Sex workers know what they want, and you need to see facts, not with your own bias. You need to clean your lens before working with them and interacting with sex workers. So should I go to the question? Yeah, Mira, please. Please,
Uh,
Mira.
yeah, good evening, friends. I'm a colleague of Tejasvi. I would like to say that sex workers as community live in a state of disapproval. They are living on the fringes on a daily basis, facing a lot of hate, abuse from people. So the first thing when you work as a mental health professional is to understand that every person has their own inherent abilities, like how she said, unbiased approach. Also the idea that they are not being accepted by the society, which every human being really wants to belong to somebody, wants to be owned up by somebody. So let us see that the human values are there before we start giving them advice or give them a therapy. Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask Teju. Thank you.
Thank you, Mira. Thank you. I really don't know why this silence is there. I hope I have not confused people or I have not overburdened anybody with the presentation. I, yeah.
No, I think we have been in gender talks talking so many different topics. This is the first time we have touched upon sex work. So maybe people
Okay.
need
Okay.
to
Yeah.
relate, but we will, I think, wait and take questions. But in the meantime, I was also thinking that this week has been the sex worker day and all that. So do you want to maybe say something about how it went and why these days are important?
Yeah, 3rd March was Sex Workers' Rights Day, and it was the International Sex Workers' Rights Day. And because see, there are several days people just celebrate and get away with that, but it's a long journey. Sex workers' rights based approach and acceptance by activists, that even the feminists for that matter in India, and to accept that sex work is work, and it's still a journey. We are still struggling with that. People come up with their own ideas and their own agendas, and hardly people see facts, and they just have their own ideologies around sex work. So it is very difficult, to speak about right. Like for example, even the NHRC, they have come up with a wonderful guideline. It was advisory by NHRC. I think in the month of I think after COVID actually. I think they have released this advisory somewhere in November. If I'm not wrong, but after during the COVID and the impact of COVID, that sex works needs to be included as informal sector workers. They need that recognition, so the government support can reach to them, which is there were some packages announced by the government for the migrants and informal sector workers. So same way the sex workers can get benefited. And we were so happy that the government, the apex body of the human rights in India, they have accepted this, that sex work is a kind of labor. But unfortunately, they have taken it, they have changed those guidelines, they have taken it back, and they said ultimately they have done the amendment in that advisory, and they said that we don't mean that sex work should get accepted as work, but we are saying that it is on the humanitarian grounds. So no, that happens because we face tremendous backlash from the anti-trafficking organizations, and they were promoting the thought that if any government machinery will accept sex work as work or give space for sex workers as workers, this kind of recognition may lead to trafficking. Actually, this is such a baseless kind of argument, but this is the reality, and this is the real world we live in. Like it's very hard and it's very difficult and feels gives you a sense of helplessness that you're working for so many years and working for the rights of sex workers. But people consider that sex workers, right-based organizations are promoting sex work. They don't see their role in prevention of trafficking. And only trafficking, so-called anti-trafficking organizations, they are getting so powerful. They have such a powerful lobby that they can even pressurize the National Human Rights Commission to do certain amendments. But that's the reality now. We need to deal with that. So the journey is not easy. The sex workers achieving their rights, don't know, like it seems very tricky sometimes, very difficult sometimes, but we will not lose our hope. So we are on journey, we know, but we don't know how, where we are going to reach the destination. So yeah, it's difficult time. Yeah.
Ma'am, can I ask you a question?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah. So with the whole issue of the lockdown and the major mental health issues that everybody faced,
Yeah.
and more so vulnerable populations, I work at an organization which works with HIV, works with a lot of vulnerable groups. And even we have, had a lot of issues in being able to reach out to our community because of this lockdown.
Okay.
And
Okay.
what are some ways you think that we could have helped out in this situation? Because it was new for all of us, basically.
Yes.
And, reaching out to them, providing services, providing their basic needs as well were a major issue. So
Yeah.
what are some of the things, maybe if not even at that lockdown, now that they would really require from, organizations that can make a difference to them? If it's not direct basic needs, then, in other ways, yeah.
Yeah, so COVID has impacted sex workers tremendously, like everybody for that matter, for all of us also. But sex workers, especially because, their entire income was stopped, totally stopped. And it has not come back to normal yet. It will take, I think, another 6 months or maybe 1 year to, get things back to normal. So the zero income kind of situation was very, very vulnerable. Women have become very vulnerable, not only women, but transgenders, male sex workers also, because especially one group of male sex workers, they approached us last month, and they said that we have lost our jobs. They were so-called male breadwinners of their families, and the family members were not aware that they are doing sex work, and they have stopped their income. So, and the other thing, jobs they used to do, and that was gone. So the situations are horrifying, and so getting depressed, getting into depression is very common. They don't have friendly platforms to communicate with people, and people have see. And one thing, I think we should also know that this social media platform that hardly is useful for sex workers at large. I'm speaking about a large number of sex workers. So many people have tried doing something online during this COVID and lockdown phase, but that has not reached to sex workers. So they need a human face, with them. So that makes a hell lot of difference. So one thing I can suggest you here. Sex workers, they are survivors, even though they are not traffic victims, but they are survivors. Not in a typical sense, but their inner strength is seriously very high, even as compared to you and me. And that we need to understand if we are doing counseling with them, if you are doing any kind of trauma counseling with them, you need to make them understand about their own strength and their own skills. I think that helps during counseling a lot. If you consider that they are totally they might be having low self-esteem, definitely, but their inner strength is really very, very powerful. And if you just can trigger that out, I think it will change. That their entire way of looking at their own life is also can change. So that is one thing I can look at it when it comes to working with sex workers in these kind of pandemic situations. That really matters a lot.
So basically, to help and give them their confidence back.
Yes, because they have all those things inside there. You just need to, ask them to memorize those things. Like they have done that. They have done it so many times. They have faced so many challenges in their lives. Just remind them about that. So that will help. That will definitely help.
Yeah, we've also been receiving a lot of, our helpline service has brought out a lot of sexual health issues. Invariably, we will have men asking, does this also work as a sex phone line, like a phone sex line? So I was just wondering whether, is that something that is coming up for women in sex work, other genders, that they are now expanding services because of this whole lockdown issue?
Yes. Many sex workers have tried. They use this term called phone sex. They will ask the customer to recharge recharge the phone, and then they will do a video call with their customers, and they will charge for it. But that is also a bit risky for many sex workers, because you don't know, you will not have control over the videos the person can make out of that kind of call. So but this is happening, and the interest of pornographic material by the customers, especially men, that has becoming quite a big issue with sex workers also, because now there were certain cases we have handled very recently in Pune, in the red light area where I work with Saheli. So there were some customers, they were started asking sex workers to have some sexual positions like they have seen in pornography, and that was not something which is like, it was very kind of abusive kind of acts they were asking, and they were asking sex workers to do that, and they were offering more money. So this is happening because people were there, men were there in their homes, not having access to actual sexual activity. They all seen lots of pornography, which was not very normal most of the time. So that has been a issue now. We are facing that.
So how do, like in terms of this, it becomes very difficult with legal justice, right? If they, use the same videos and put them out again into the public. Is there, we've had one or two, issues coming up where, people send terrible photographs over the groups. So how does the cybercrime or anything help out with these issues of when it relates to?
Yeah, you need to pursue them actually. Cyber crimes, it depends upon the officer actually, because we had dealt with one case. The officer was very active and very, actually he worked very proactively, and that was a big pleasant surprise for us. So, but one thing is very sure, that even though you go to a cybercrime department, you need we need to maintain a very strong follow-up. Otherwise, it just goes off. Nothing happened. So that's very important.
Yeah, we have found that in a couple of cases. So
yeah. Thanks. And it also shows what the general perception of even the legal machinery towards sex workers. If that complaint been lodged by a non-sex worker, they may take immediate cognizance. But if such a complaint is launched by a sex worker, they will say, that's the job. No, they have to do that. That's a common tendency, and you need to deal with that and work with that. So that becomes very tricky. So you just leave the counseling which the person needs, but you will start working and having an awareness session with the police officer. But that's the reality. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you for that, ma'am. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, because I am not able to see any questions in the chat also. So
I had a question about the law sections. So there was one thing you mentioned about lowering the rank of police, which I did
yes.
not quite understand.
Yeah, that was amendment which happened several years back in the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act. Initially, the rank of the police officer who can do a rescue raid was high, but after that amendment, they have given those powers to the lower rank police officers.
Oh, okay.
And usually, I think those people who are having experience working with the police department, you will always find that the superiors, like rank wise, the superiors, they are much cooperative, much aware about the laws and the implementation part. And as you come down in the cadre, it is very difficult. So yeah, it definitely creates more issues when the actual raids took place in the red light areas.
Okay.
Because then abuse and mistreating the sex workers becomes very, very common if a lower rank police officer is active in the raid.
Yeah.
But the law did that, and so we have faced many issues, and we are still facing.
I would also maybe like to ask you. You had mentioned about this need for to have trade unions, which is important, and you had also mentioned about how this whole thing is not being recognized as work and all that. And we are also talking about having the right to have brothels and ownership. So how is it engaging with people on the political groups, like the political right and the political left? Because on the political right, they have this type of moralistic attitudes in the contemporary.
Yeah.
On the political left, they think that any form of proprietorship, enterprise is inherently evil, goes like the Marxist idea of what you call work, there being no control over, no ownership of means of protection and all that. Does the idea of advocating brothel fit in with any of these groups, or where do we find support for it?
No support, because legally brothel keeping is illegal, brothels are illegal, brothel keepers are illegal entities. So everything around brothel itself is not allowed by, or even not tolerated by any of the political parties for that matter, because the entire construct is that sex work is exploitation, sex work is trafficking, sex work is abuse. You take any political party, whether left, right, central, whatever, everybody is having around, the intention is around that, then the construct is that. So it is very difficult, but some, at least some left parties, they at least have some inclusive kind of gesture that, considering sex workers like other workers, other migrant workers or informal sector workers, at least some space. But in right-wing politics, no. It's not at all, like they're always treated as victims, and then that's why you need to finish that profession off, that kind of agenda you will see. Yeah, but getting workers right is a big struggle. It's a big struggle for sex workers. you might there is an example in Maharashtra itself when VAMP, that is Vishya Anyamukti Parishad from Sangli, it's a sex workers collective, and they have started. They have gone to the government and they have asked for a piece of land where they want to start their own housing society. That was denied because they consider that these are the group of sex workers and they will start brothels over there. So the definition of brothel is a issue. So that label is harmful, and yeah, it's very difficult to get away with that.
It's true, but going beyond partisan politics, there is also this whole question of moral views. And so what would be the best argument we can place? Because I'm actually with you, Tejas. We have worked together. I've seen the value of having this type of security, safety. And there will be some horrible brothel keepers, as will be in any other enterprise. But on the whole, there are people who are happy there. So I think as a system, it does work, at least for many people. But how do you ethically, morally say that this should be allowed or this is right?
I think we need to start with legally, Delphina. Ethically, morally, things change a little bit. I think we can see the changes happening towards transgenders. Because the transgender bill came, it's again a mess, but still there is some recognition. So, and transgender is not getting treated as a crime in India, fortunately. So that was something which has changed a little bit of perspective from the mainstream society. So we need to start from decriminalization. I think that's the first thing which people should do. The state should do. Otherwise, people are going to have the same perspective. They will not change. And having the entire morality kind of perception and attitude towards looking at sex work as immoral. If the law is saying immoral traffic, so what is moral trafficking? There is no moral trafficking. Trafficking itself is not good. It should be avoided and it should be prevented. Nobody is having second opinion about that. But that's how it is. It is always, because anything to do with sex and sexuality is treated as not good. It's a high stigmatized kind of debate and discussion. Nobody even forget about debate. People don't want to discuss also. So as the issue. Yeah, Meera, you want to?
Yes. To continue the conversation, see, the premise is this. Sex is an self-expression of love, like singing, like any other service. When people can think of sex as a pleasure, sex as an offense differently and distinctly different, then it becomes easy for you to deal with sex workers or with the law. Most often it is all collapsed. It has double standard. For people with money and privilege, their sexuality is, portrayed, and you can, for example, sexuality of a person in the film world is really heralded. But when you see a woman on the street trying to, give a sexual service, she is penalized. So these kind of things, our own perceptions, our attitude towards sex, paid sex, and sexuality has to be questioned. I think only if we can answer these things, we can move on to making laws about sex workers, saying sex work is work. We have to have this kind of thinking first among our own people who are educated, who are good-hearted people. They have to join the tribe. Only then I think change is possible. Yes.
Yeah. And change is happening. Okay, like when I started working, I remember things were so different. And now if I see, there are many youngsters, many organizations, many groups who are very keen to join the work and, join the movement of sex workers' right-based movement. Like they're very keen to know. And, I think that's a good sign. So we do have hopes. We have not lost our entire hope and trust that something good will happen in our society.
Exactly. So, 30 years back, Center for Global Women's Leadership, which conducts the 16 days of violence against women campaign,
Yes.
only this year included sex workers.
Yeah.
So we are happy that, at all levels, at multiple levels, multiple tiers of work, they are trying to at least think that sex workers should be there.
Yes.
They're trying to really uphold their rights and dignity.
Yeah. That's true. Okay. So I think we can stop now, or if any comments, any questions.
Maybe we can then formally conclude, but if you might be here for a moment, if there are anybody who wanted to speak without the recording training, they
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
over to your email.
Okay. So you can stop recording, right?
Yeah. So we will stop the live streaming and recording now.
Okay. Thank you, Rima.
Yeah. I also want to thank all of you for being wonderful participants on the behalf of Nirangal Charitable Trust, Open Space Foundation, and the Women's Department of Bharathidasan University. So our next Gender Talk sessions in English will be next Friday, and in Tamil it will be next Sunday. So we hope that all of you can attend those as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rima. Thank you, Tejasvi.
Thank you. Thank you.